Hey everybody, welcome back to Fix the Rust Bucket. We're ready to get the suspension reinstalled on this truck, but before we get into that, I just want to let you know I do have a giveaway planned in the near future. I'll give you more details on that a little bit later on in the video. Right now, let's get started with the suspension. So, as you can see, we have the lower control arm already installed, nuts and bolts. They're just in there loose, so we can move the control arm around easily. Before we go to install the spring, we'll get into that. But before we can install the spring, we do have to install the upper control arm here. So we'll get started with the upper control arm and getting the knuckle almost ready to go. And then we'll reinstall the spring. So with your upper control arm, if you saw my earlier videos, and I'll post the videos later on at the end of this, I'll post a link to the videos. We cut the old washers off of the old upper control arms. We're going to reuse those. Same thing with the nuts and bolts. The washers with these aftermarket polyurethane bushings, we've already greased them all. They're ready to go, but you do have to have your washers in between the bushing and the mount area. So we'll start off with taking your bolt, inserting it through the hole a little bit, and go ahead and get the washer up in there too. Get that lined up. Get the next washer ready to go. Squeeze that in there. We're going to use that nut and bolt. Just hold this side and then we can work on the other side. Again, we're just going to put everything on loose. All right, so with that one side of the upper control arm on, get to the other side here. Same thing, go through that hole on the spring housing. Try and get the nut started, washer on there, get over to the other side, squeeze the washer in on that side. That one's in place. Again, just loosely put the nut and bolt on. It's now upper control arms in there loose, lower control arms in there loose. Now with the spring housing up top here on the frame, it's a smooth surface all the way around. Up in there, there's no set. You'll see, you can feel an indentation where the spring lays. But on the bottom, you'll see here, there's an actual spot where the end cut of your spring right here has to sit in a specific location on the lower control arm. Up here, you don't have to worry about that. That's not going to matter up there. It's cut and pressed differently than the bottom is. So you can see a little bit of gap and no gap up there. It's more flat level across the top. The bottom is where you have to be concerned. So we're going to take our noise dampeners right here. This is for the top. Just set that right on top of your spring. No specific, let's just drop it in place and it sits there. The bottom, you can see here maybe, there's actually, you can see the indentation where the spring used to sit. And then on the lower control arm, you'll see it's pretty much formed out where that cutout of the spring has to sit in a specific location. So take that rubber noise dampener, line that up with that the best you can. If you have new ones, they're not going to have those on there. That's fine. Just remember where that is on the control arm. Lay your rubber boot on there. We're going to go ahead and stick the spring up into the housing. Push the control arm down out of your way and get the end of that end cut on that control arm where it's supposed to sit. And then just give yourself, you can use the control arm to hold this, to basically hold the spring here. Just give it a little bit of a pull. It's in place, but now we have to jack up the lower control arm, getting pressure on there so we can reinstall the knuckle joint on the outside. As you can see, I got the jack underneath, lift it up without hitting the ball joint threads. Spring is in its place. We actually have, I've jacked it up high enough with enough pressure on here. The truck is just coming off of the jack stand back there with the pressure. Now, we're gonna go ahead and get the knuckle and start reinstalling that. Get that in place. Again, I want to get everything put together loosely. Then we'll tighten everything back up to the correct torque specs. So with the lower knuckle, get the control arm, upper control arm out of the way. The nut on here. Get the nut for the upper control arm, tighten down. All right, so with those, the upper and lower control arm ball joints reattached loosely from the knuckle, now we're gonna go ahead and tighten these down to the torque specs, get our pins back in there. Then we can remove the jack and start working on getting the shock installed. We got to reposition the jack to get the shock back inside there. It's in the way right now. I'm going to start with the lower ball joint here. Get my wrench on actual tightening. All right, so with the castle nuts snug or, hand tight, we're gonna go ahead and torque them down. We have to remember that with the castle nut, you have to leave, or you have to, when you gotta torque it, you still have to leave room for your cotter pin to fit into the hole. So we're gonna work on lining those up and get this set. So with the bottom castle nut in, we lucked out torque. The torque actually fell right on where the pin can go in. So we're going to go ahead and get the cotter pin inserted in here. With the bottom one done, we can move to the top one and get the top one also done. That's our torque. Find the hole for the cotter pin to go in, which I checked earlier, it was on the side here. We gotta go just a little bit tighter. Doesn't have to go much more. It's 1/16 of an inch maybe, if that. So that's now secure. All right, so with those in place, we can go ahead, we're gonna lower the jack down, get it in a new location, get our lower control arm pushed back up enough to reinstall the new shock, and then we can drop this all down. The shock will hold everything in place where it's supposed to be, and we can start reinstalling the rest of the stuff. All right, so before we put the shock inside the spring, comes with a little zip tie to hold the boot down here. All right, so with the zip tie on, we're gonna go ahead and put the washer and the bushing on the shock where it mounts underneath of here. Hold the boot down so it doesn't push it out. Get that inserted into the bottom of the control arm. Just working the boot through the hole. Got the boot through the lower control arm hole. Get this up to the mount. And we got to lower the jack a little bit to make some room to wiggle the shock in there. So with the shock back in, everything's jacked up. The shock back in, you can see up here at the top where the shock is sticking through. We'll take our washer, our rubber bushing, take the washer, set that on top. Just gonna put the nut on the top for now to hold the shock in place. And we're gonna tighten down the top bolt. And then we'll go down to the lower control arm and tighten it up down there. All right, so our top nut's secure. Then we gotta line up and then do the bottom ones. All right, so now with the ball joints and the control arms all torqued down, shock is put in place, we're ready to reinstall the hub back on. Now remember, we pulled the old hub off. I told you that these rubber clamps, if you buy a higher grade quality thing, you'll get new little clips and clamps to go in to mount the wiring back up. Get your plate back on. Feed your wire through the hole of the plate up in this area. That notch on your plate will sit over top of or just past the sensor. Get those lined up. Just toss your wire up over the knuckle. and reinsert the new hub. Now here on the back side, just get your wire out of your way for now. Get all 3 of your bolts started by hand first, so you got everything lined up and nothing's cross-threaded. Might take a little bit of wiggling the plate and the hub to get them to line up. You could always pull the hub out just a little bit. And then start with the next up top. And the last one on the back bottom. Now I'm going to get these snug with my hand first, and then we'll tighten them down and torque them down. All right, with them all snug in place, make sure your wire's not pinched right here between the plate. That's loose. Now we can go ahead and tighten them down. I'm just going to go ahead and right to the Torx wrench and tighten them down. Do a couple turns. Just alternate the bolts, nuts and bolts, till you get them all tight. That way you know that you've seated the hub back onto the knuckle square. That one I got to get from the other side. Last one. With that secure, you can, but don't put the wires back on just yet. Because remember, you still got to bring the brake line and the caliper back in. And if you remember, they were not tangled up, but the way that they lay inside there, one's underneath the other one. You don't want to pinch that stuff, so I'm just going to set that off to the side for now. And we're going to go ahead and get brake caliper bracket and everything back on first. All right, so you're going to grab your brake caliper bracket. I'm using the old stuff right now back on here just to get this truck back rolling. I've gone this far. We're just going to go ahead and do a new brake job. Brake job on the truck, and more than likely do new calipers. Those will be in later videos. I just got to get this rolling so we can start working on the body work. It won't be on the road just yet. All right, so with the brake caliper, the outside brake pad has to be inserted onto the brake caliper bracket first. Then you can stick that on. And then get your brake caliper lined up and the bolts inside that. Grab our brake caliper, get it back on top, laying in here. Now our ABS wire will go up over, and it will end up mounting right here to this bracket. Tighten that back up for now. Tighten up our caliper bolts. With the caliper bolts back on tight, get our ABS wire back out of here. I'm gonna go ahead and start reconnecting the ABS wire. So that'll be this piece right here, snaps into there, up over the control arm, up here. Slip that into place. The next one, let's see if I can get you a better shot in here. Next one mounts right on top of the upper control arm mount. And then your plug and your plug mount is right here on the shock tower. So we're going to go ahead and just plug it back in first. Get that plugged in, snapped on, and then just snap that back into place on your shock tower. So with that completes this side of it. We still have now our tie rod to attach. Get started with that. Same thing. It's got a castle nut and a cotter pin laying around here somewhere. Now back again, we're going to try and get this as close as we can to alignment from what it was when we took it apart. And then with that, the outer tie rod here was 19 turns. So we're going to spin it counterclockwise right now till we hear that snap, so we know we're not cross threading it. And then we're going to start and go 19 turns in. And after we have it all said and done, put together, we'll go up and down, we'll readjust it to get them as straight as possible. So there's 1, 2, 3, 18, 19 turns around. Take the jam nut. We're just going to snug up the jam nut for now. We're not even going to tighten it down with a wrench because we got to get the other side put together first. Then we'll make sure that everything is in place correctly. Insert that through the knuckle. Put the castle nut on again. Just snug. We do have to grease this boot. We'll get to that later. But for putting back on, your brake caliper is going to be, your brake caliper and your rotor are going to be loose until we get the other side put together. And then when we step on the brake, it will compress the caliper back on, tighten this back up. But other than that, that completes this front corner for rebuilding this front suspension, this front corner side. One last thing I didn't see until just now. We will take and slip the brake line. Don't want to miss that. Back up over the upper control arm and we'll tighten that bolt down. Then that will complete one side of the truck. All right, so that completes the left side of the vehicle. We're going to move over to the right side and get the right side complete, and then the sway bar on, and that will be finishing up the front suspension on this truck. But before I do, let's get back into that giveaway I was talking about earlier in the video. I want to do a giveaway of a Fix the Rust Bucket coffee or tea mug, Fix the Rust Bucket sticker, and also I have a magnetic wrist type, whatever you want to call it, a tool or extra hand. Now for the giveaway, I want to do that when we reach 250 subscribers. So if you would, share these videos with like-minded people, and when we reach that 250 subscriber count, we'll do another video for everybody to get a chance to comment in that video and have the opportunity to win this stuff. All right, let's get back to working on the truck. All right, with both sides complete, we have a few minor things and adjustments to make later on. With that complete, we can now reinstall the sway bar back onto the truck. And that's what we're gonna do right now. So take this and slip it up over the control arms. Going to put them in enough. Make sure it doesn't fall down. It should be good. Now we'll move over and do the end links. All right, so we did the same thing on the other side. Now it's just time to tighten this down. All right, so that wraps it up for the suspension on the truck. I have a few minor things to do. Put the skid plates back up underneath of it. Gonna get the tires as straight as possible again until I get it sent out to the alignment. We will be diving into body work next. Don't forget, like I said earlier in the video, I'm going to do a giveaway at 250 subscribers, so subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so when I post another video, you'll get notified.